We process it as minimally as possible. We end up with 1 gram of sugar. You can take that enzymatic process really, really far. So it breaks down, the sugar and breaks it down and processes it even more and more and more. And so you get more and more and more sugar and sweetness. And that super processed version is not that different from taking corn and turning into high fructose corn syrup.
Welcome back, everybody, to episode 39 of the Clean Kitchen podcast. And today we have a very special guest, Christina. She is the co-founder of Willa's Kitchen, which is a clean ingredient oat milk brand. And Christina and I had a call, I guess it was last year, and she was telling me about how their oat milk is really made different than every other oat milk out there. So, Christina, thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm a big fan.
Thank you. And let's get right into it. Let's talk about how, I guess, most oat milk on grocery store shelves is made and how your oat milk is different from that.
Sure. So we started Willa's because we were tired of plant-based milk that wasn't really made of plants. We were just seeing so many artificial ingredients and rapeseed oil and tons of sugar. And so we wanted to bring our grandmother's recipe to the world. She used real organic ingredients you could find in your kitchen, vanilla extract and sea salt. And as we were kind of getting down the entrepreneurial path and just digging in and getting really curious about what was going on in the category, we couldn't understand why there was so much sugar in so many of the oat milks out there. And then they didn't really have any of the benefits of the oats, like protein and prebiotic fiber. And what we discovered is typically oat milk is made by taking the oat starch and the sugary part and filtering out the protein and fiber and taking that protein and fiber and discarding it. And hopefully it gets, upcycled or used as animal feed, but typically it gets discarded as food waste into a landfill. And then the sugary part gets processed to make it even sweeter. So that's why you end up with these brands. If you've ever looked at an oat milk and been like, why does it have 7 or even 15 grams of sugar and no protein or fiber? That's because it's essentially just oat sugar. And we just knew there had to be a better, more honest, more sustainable way to go about it. And so we completely redesigned the way that plant-based milk is made. And we figured out how to mill the whole entire oat. If you want to get really nerdy, it's the whole oat groat.
Right.
And that creates this really rich flavor. It means we've got 1 gram of sugar versus 7 to 15. And it's got all the protein and prebiotic fiber inside of it. So 4 grams of protein and 2 grams of prebiotic fiber per cup.
Gotcha. Yeah, I noticed when I, first got into reading ingredients and walking through the grocery store, I noticed the average oat milk would have, it said, like you said, 7, 8 grams of sugar. And then it said 7 grams of added sugar, but there was actually no added sugar in there. There was no cane sugar or anything added to it. So if I understand it correctly, they add an enzyme to the oats, which creates natural sugar, but is that really natural?
It's, so my sister Elena has a background in food and beverage manufacturing, and she talks about how this enzymatic process it's really an example of food processing kind of on a spectrum. We process it as minimally as possible. We end up with 1 gram of sugar. You can take that enzymatic process really, really far. And so it breaks down, the sugar and breaks it down and processes it even more and more and more. And so you get more and more and more sugar and sweetness. And that super processed version is not that different from taking corn and turning into high fructose corn syrup. So, from a labeling perspective, I think as a category, as an oat milk category, I think there needs to be a lot more transparency around this, because I just don't think I don't think as a category, it's fair to call something oats if it is no longer the same nutritional integrity, no longer has the same nutritional integrity as the oats you would buy for oatmeal.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did a full podcast on milk, diving into kind of all the different areas, where whole milk, plant-based milk. And I think typically when people think they're consuming plant-based milk, they consider it a healthy option until, like you said, you look at the ingredients and you see all that it is in there. It's really eye opening. But what I love most about Willa's is how thoughtful you are on what goes into that oat milk, how much time goes into really research and development. Hearing you talk about it on other podcasts, it's really amazing to see. Would you mind maybe telling a little bit about the story behind Willa's, how you got here today, your grandmother's recipe, and the story of Willa?
Yeah, my grandmother was a real force. I mean, she was an amazing person. Everyone that she met, she would just kind of key into what was special about them. We also talk about how she was a native New Yorker. She was real, she was honest, she was uncompromising, and that's really what our brand is about as well. And she started making oat milk for her kids and grandkids if they're having digestive issues, which if you have young children, you know that that's pretty common. And just wanting to make it taste really good. So she would add a little vanilla, add a little sea salt. And that's really where the recipe started. My sister and my mom took that recipe and kind of iterated on it to make it, taste delicious and make sure that we could scale it up and really live up to our values and live up to her name. And with everything we do, with every decision we make, we say, is this the healthiest, most sustainable, most delicious way to go about it? And, we did not choose the easy path. There are a lot of examples of doing this the easy way. We chose the hard way by using the whole oat, but it was the right way. And we believe it tastes better. We believe whole food, plant-based ingredients taste better. There's a reason why nature, creates this bounty of amazing plant-based ingredients. And why not celebrate the whole entire oat and use all of it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's amazing.
Yeah. And you can taste the difference too. Like when I try one of the oat milks or any plant-based milk from the store that, still uses simple ingredients, I don't know, in my opinion, it's very watery. It's just like kind of has a watery taste, but yours is actually like creamy and has taste to it, and it uses, real ingredients, no natural flavors, no gums, emulsifiers, none of that. Um so yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of your oat milk compared to other brands out there. Did you
Thank
ever think
you.
about, yeah, did you ever think about other plant-based milks like almond milk or anything like that?
Yeah, we have. We started with oat milk for a few reasons. One, we wanted to bring my grandma's recipe to the world, and we saw this opportunity to share something that was whole food plant based, using the whole of each ingredient, especially the oat. What's wonderful about oats is they're also really great for the planet. Just like they support our own microbiomes with prebiotic fiber, they also support soil health. So the soil is, healthier and more nutrient dense if it also has a diverse microbiome. And cover crops really help with that. I mean, you guys know this as well as anyone. Oats are, supporting our digestive systems by improving our microbiomes, but they do the same thing for the soil. And especially organic oats, which is a key
Mm.
thing I think we'll probably talk about.
Yeah.
But they also even help pull carbon out of the atmosphere and put it back into the soil where it belongs. So creating this real like positive cycle. It's not just trying to be neutral. Oats help create a net positive impact and help fight climate change. And that was really compelling to us. This year we've seen, floods in California, but in drought years, the water usage in California is just it's astronomical when you look at almonds and the almond crops and the impact the pesticides that they're using are having on the bee populations. We aim to be the most sustainable plant-based milk option available, as well as the healthiest and tastiest. And so oats just make a lot of sense from a value standpoint for us.
Yeah. So that's regenerative agriculture, right? When you're doing it like
So
that.
yeah, oats, because they're a cover crop and because they help the soil, improve the soil health,
Yeah.
they're sort of naturally regenerative.
Gotcha.
Because we relentlessly try to improve. We are now working with farmers that are organic certified who are beginning to use more regenerative practices and take it an even a further step. So that's something that we're working on this year. But just organic oats in general are already helping to fight climate change.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe let's get into that now because I think that is really important is why you use organic oats and what companies that aren't using organic oats, they have a risk of being sprayed with a common pesticide called glyphosate, which we've talked about quite a bit here. But let's dive into organic oats and the importance of them to Willas.
Yeah, this was a no-brainer for us. It was like we're either using organic oats or we're not creating this company. Our grandmother did not want Roundup in her oat milk. And neither do we. To be honest, as a society, I don't know why we're still using this ingredient. We've known for decades that it's correlated to cancer. It's correlated to killing the nutrients in the microbiome of our soil. It's getting into our water. It's, there are certain things where it's like a gray area. It's like, oh, is this harmful or is this not harmful? The the active ingredient in Roundup, which is glyphosate, it's pretty clear. We've got a lot of data and we've had it for a long time. And so for us, using organic oats was just a no-brainer. I mean, it's the difference between an oat that is depleting the soil health, is depleting the soil of nutrients, is, creating something toxic for our environment and for our health, versus something that is actively improving the soil health, improving our health, improving our microbiomes, and helping to fight climate change. I'm a breast cancer survivor, and that experience also really solidified for me how important it is to use ingredients that have a positive impact on our bodies and our in ecosystems versus the opposite.
Yeah. Were you, because I was listening to another podcast about how you were diagnosed with breast cancer in 2020. Is that right?
Yeah.
Were
Yep.
you, I assume you were kind of already passionate about, nutrition and healthy eating before that, but did that diagnosis kind of, I don't know, make you even more passionate?
Yes.
Yeah.
Short answer is yes. I was a health nut, when I was completely blindsided in 2020. I didn't have a family history. The only risk factor I have is that I have dense breasts, which most young women do. And the fact of the matter is breast cancer rates are rising pretty quickly amongst young, healthy women. I think this is a whole other podcast, but there's just a myriad of things in our environment that we can't fully control. And so I will say I feel super fortunate because my mom always encouraged me to do self exams. Young women out there, you're not always encouraged to do it, but do it. Just, look up a video, ask your doctor, do them monthly, and get your mammogram as soon as you can, especially if you've got a family history. It saved my life. I'm just super passionate about that. But yes, I was completely blindsided. And I went from being a health nut to somebody who really became a lot more intentional about my own health, eating, going from being kind of plant-based to mostly plant-based, cutting out almost all processed food, really focusing on organic, focusing on the things that made me feel good. I
Mhm.
worked out 5 days a week through chemo, which I think is part of the reason I felt well enough to work full time building the business. And thankfully, I feel so fortunate because by the time they went in for my surgery, my lumpectomy surgery, I was at stage 0 and it was almost completely gone and it was out of all my lymph nodes. So I had what they call a complete response, which is even better than remission. It means it's unlikely to ever come back. And I can't prove that, eating really clean and mostly plant-based, though imperfect. I eat chocolate every day, but really putting a focus on my own health and my mental health and my physical health and what made my body feel good, like it certainly couldn't have hurt. So yeah. And then I think the other piece of it is when you get diagnosed like that and get blindsided, you're sort of like, what was it? Like, what
Yes.
was the thing? And you're never going to know. And the truth is, it was probably a bunch of stuff because this is just the world we live in. And so my co-founders, which are my husband and my sister and I, it really solidified our commitment to using ingredients that have a net positive impact on people's health and on the environment and don't cause any sort of added level of stress or anxiety around, something harmful.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's an amazing story and one worth sharing. So I'm glad you did and take the time to do that. Everyone that can do it, make sure you do get checked out. Like Christina said,
Yeah.
Yeah.
extremely important. It's amazing too that I think a lot of times what we've talked about is something bad almost has to happen to people in order for them to really look in the mirror and understand what the food they're putting in their body or what other kind of chemicals they might be exposed to in their environment. Kyle and I were both diagnosed with Crohn's disease years ago, and that forced us to kind of re-examine the food that we put in our body. It's amazing how prevalent it is within every day. I guess outside of food too. Just since we're on this topic, what other areas do you prioritize your health? You mentioned working out. Are there other areas too that you focus on?
Yeah, working out for me is kind of like it's not optional. When I was diagnosed, I realized how important it was for my mental health as well. And so it's something that I just try to make sure I'm doing at least 3 days a week, if not 4 to 5. Another big one for me is getting out in nature. I love to hike. I love to ski. So for me, just being outside is like really good for my mental clarity and my creativity. I do the Headspace app. So, I for a while I was like, I have to do 20 minutes of meditation a day. And then my therapist was like, that sounds like that's kind of challenging. Maybe you just try for 5. And I was like, right, yeah, five a day is doable. Like, let's just do something that, makes sense as an
Yeah.
entrepreneur. And that's just been a game changer. And then I think, honestly, seeing a therapist has been amazing. I mean, getting diagnosed with something like this really creates a lot of there's a whole path you go down, between anxiety and then eventually kind of gratitude for what you went through and what you learned from it and how you've grown as a person. But I'm a big fan of caring for your mental health as much as your physical health.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think 5 minutes. I mean, a lot of people are scared to, start meditation. They don't know what to do. They have all these thoughts, but literally, if you could just sit, with yourself 5 minutes a day, I think that that is incredible. It's very powerful.
And
Even
you can start at 30 seconds or a
yeah,
minute. That's the great thing about these apps. Like, they're not like, oh, you have to be a yogi immediately. They're like, no, let's like step it up because it's hard.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Going back to the oat, you guys said you said you used the whole oat. So I assume then your oat milk is going to be more nutritious than the average oat milk out there because you're using the whole oat, more fiber, more vitamins and minerals. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's sort of like we don't know what's going on in the soul of an oat. So let's make sure we get all of it.
Yeah.
And oats have prebiotic fiber, protein, they have L-theanine, which helps, regulate your nervous system and create calmness. They also support the microbiome, which I think modern medicine still has a lot to learn about. There's a lot of mystery there that we haven't figured out. And so that was just really important to us to use the whole of every plant based ingredient we can. And you can see it on the nutrition label. So all of our products have, at least 4 grams of protein. Our chocolate oat milk has 5 grams because we use real cacao from Rocca chocolate that's sourced directly from indigenous Peruvian farmers. And we've got 2 grams of prebiotic fiber in each of our in a barista and our unsweetened original, and then 3 grams because of the cacao and the chocolate. And so that's more protein and fiber than you'll find in most plant-based milks, definitely the other oat milk options.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you've gone through this process of sourcing real organic ingredients, what is that like? Is it difficult to find these different ones? You mentioned the cacao as an example. What can you kind of give us a behind the scenes of what that's like?
Yeah, the cacao is such a great example because we kept having people when we do like events and stuff being like, hey, could you create a chocolate milk? And we're like, wow, that does sound good. What if we could create like a healthy chocolate milk that tastes delicious, which is not easy. It took us rounds and rounds and rounds of testing with adults and kids to really make sure we nailed it. But eventually we did. And as we kind of were figuring out what cacao we wanted to use, we realized that unfortunately cacao is associated with like the worst human rights or the worst practices of any agricultural product. It's associated with like child slave labor. It's a dark, dark history. And we just wanted to make sure that, we knew where our cacao was coming from and that it was fair for everybody involved, including the farmers. And so we partnered with our friends at Rocca Chocolate, and they said, we've got this amazing cacao that comes directly from these indigenous farmer cooperatives in Peru. We did a documentary about them. It's actually where cacao is originally from. And what's cool about Rocca is they have transparent trading, so you can see exactly what everybody in the food system is paid. And so we, from a value standpoint, it was obvious. And then we tasted it with our oat milk, and it has this like brownie like flavor, just naturally from the cacao that pairs really beautifully with the maple sugar that we use to kind of balance the bitterness. And it was like a match made in heaven.
I can vouch for that. It's very good.
Thanks.
So you said you made a documentary?
we didn't make a documentary, but Rocca made a documentary called Raising the Bar, on sourcing this amazing cacao from these farmers in Peru.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And so that's just an example of how much thought we put into sourcing every ingredient, just looking at, at it from every standpoint: health, ethical sourcing practices, and of course, the planet and the environment.
Yeah. Yes. Speaking of ingredients too, I know in the barista one, and we talked about this on our when we talked last time, but you use organic high oleic sunflower oil, which I think a lot of people are scared of when they see sunflower oil because, we talk about how harmful vegetable oils are and how we shouldn't be consuming them in large amounts, but this specific type of sunflower oil, which I talk about all the time, and Kevin and I have done podcasts about this, but it's different from regular sunflower oil. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, yeah. The oil conversation, I wish the world of oil wasn't quite so complicated, to be honest with you. It's hard to be a consumer sometimes.
For
So
sure.
Willa's Unsweetened Original has just water, organic oats, vanilla extract, and sea salt. Willa's chocolate also doesn't have any oil, super clean label. It's got cacao and maple sugar as well. When we wanted to make a barista oat milk that would foam and froth and create latte art and all the things that people want in a coffee shop or at home, it was clear we needed to add some fat. And so we did a ton of research. We talked to tons of integrative doctors and functional nutritionists. And to your point, there's the world of seed oils that are high in omega-6s that have a lot of inflammatory kind of risk factors. And then there is high oleic sunflower oil, which it essentially is more like an avocado oil. It's got omega-3s, it's got a lot of the good fats and fewer of the bad fats like the omega-6s. And so, it's not the cheapest ingredient. I think our competitors would laugh if they saw what we spend on organic, cold pressed, high
Yes.
oleic, non-GMO sunflower oil, but it was just the choice that made sense for us. And a lot of people don't feel great when they have these seed oils, like rapeseed oil and other things. I don't feel good. To me, I'm lactose intolerant. I feel just as bad if I drink something that's got rapeseed oil as I do if I drink milk.
Mhm.
So that was another big piece of it is, organic cold pressed high oleic sunflower oil isn't something that people tend to have issues digesting either, in addition to it being, a healthier oil.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that the vegetable oils are one of the first things if you were looking to cut something out, tend to be the first things that we recommend looking at getting rid of. So it completely makes sense. And although it is an investment, it sounds like to get that premium type of oil, it's a worthwhile one. Uh,
Yes,
yeah.
100%.
Yes. One other area that I want to hit on too that makes Willa so unique, I think, is the fact that it is shelf stable. And my understanding is that has to do with the packaging of the actual milk. Could you maybe explain too why that packaging is so important and how it's shelf stable?
Yeah, yeah, it's funny because people will look at like Willa's unsweetened and it's like water, oats, vanilla, sea salt, and they're like, "How is this in a shelf stable package? I don't get it. What are you adding?" And we're not adding any preservatives.
Mhm.
The packaging technology creates a vacuum seal. They pull out all the air, put the cap on, so it's as if no time has passed on the inside. It's similar to like if you've ever gone to Europe and seen like dairy milk on the shelf and you're like, what is happening there? It's the packaging technology. And so it allows us to be able to sell direct to consumer, sell on Amazon for people who don't have Willa's at their natural grocers in their neighborhood. And it also allows us to sell at a more accessible price point because we're not having to do refrigerated trucking. So yeah, don't be afraid of the shelf stability. We're not adding anything. It's the packaging vacuum seal.
Yeah, that's amazing. How did you figure that out? Like, what was the thought process to understand that you can vacuum seal milk almost?
We were looking at all the different packaging options and we really wanted to avoid BPA plastic and single-use plastic, and we were trying to figure out what was the most sustainable, and then we came across this option. It's imperfect. I believe Tetra Pak is recyclable in 70% of households. I know that they're working on getting it more having recyclability become more accessible. So no packaging is perfect. We looked at glass, but glass, you end up having to like ship it with bubble wrap, which sort of defeats the purpose. It's super heavy. So yeah, I guess we're nerds. We research everything before we make a decision.
That's amazing though. That's how it should be, I feel like, for these brands. Recently I've noticed a lot of a lot of brands like Oatly or Califia Farms or whatever. They, they had their original oat milk with all of these added ingredients and things, but now it seems like a lot of them are shifting to the simple ingredient oat milk with, 3, 4 ingredients. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm happy to see it.
Yeah.
I think it's time for us to have a reckoning with all these plant-based products that aren't, you know, really made of plants,
Mhm.
and don't necessarily have plant-based ingredients. I think, there's a world in which there are plant-based milks that are sort of trying to figure out their identity right now, because it went from people sort of assuming all these products were healthy to now questioning what they're seeing on the nutrition label. Willis has always made decisions based on our values. When we first launched, I had vegan friends who were like, I don't understand why you're making a healthy plant-based milk. I just want something that doesn't have animal products. And we didn't know if the demand was going to head in the direction that we were all along. But we've just always made every decision based on our values and wanting to have a net positive impact on people's health. We're not here to just make a less bad alternative to
Yeah.
dairy. We're here to have a net positive impact. And that's guided every decision we make. And that is part of the reason why we haven't done things the easy way. We've done it a harder way. And that's why you'll see on Willa's nutrition label, it looks very different from even these newer products that are coming out that are simpler ingredients. Again, 4 grams of protein isn't something you see in other oat milks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And because of that, or because of, I mean, the more fiber, more protein, less sugar, there's also less of a glucose spike that happens as well with your oat milk compared to others, right?
Yeah, 100%. That was a big reason why Dr. Mark Hyman included Willa's in his Mark's picks and said, this is the only oat milk I recommend. That was something super important to me. It's something, oat milk is something people put in their cereal, their coffee, their smoothies. It's how they start their day. If you start your day with this big sugar spike, it's not going to give you the energy you need to get through a busy, hectic, stressful, typical American workday. It's not going to set you up for success. And we would much rather create products. The whole reason we exist is to create products that improve people's health, taste delicious, that you can feel good about drinking every single day and giving to your kids as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. But Dr. Mark Hyman getting his stamp of approval. We reference him a lot on the podcast, so that's
Yeah.
a massive kind of thumbs up kind of stamp of approval there. One other thing too that I was curious about, you mentioned you're lactose intolerant. I think that's a common way that people get exposure to plant-based milk is because they cannot tolerate dairy milk. Do you see a lot of your customers follow that path, or a lot of them coming from more of the plant-based route? Where do you see most of your customers come from?
Well, I think it's important to note that 70% of the world is lactose intolerant. And, most people of color are lactose intolerant. If you want to be able to digest meat, there's like hundreds of enzymes that could do that for you. But with lactose, you either have this one enzyme or you don't. And there's only one. And
Mm.
the people who have historically had it come from a specific band of Northern Europe. But, there's examples like my husband who's got Northern European ancestry and still can't digest milk. So, you know, there's just, I think millennials and Gen Zers in particular are just a lot more aware of like how we feel when we drink and eat different things. And I think more people are becoming aware of their own kind of specific personal needs and intolerances. At the same time, I think a lot of people are really enjoying just this abundance of new dairy-free products. And when we do surveys of our fans, the number one reason they buy Willa's is the taste. And a lot of people even prefer it to dairy, which is really interesting. I think if you had asked, if that was possible 20 years ago, people would have thought you were nuts.
Yeah.
So I think there's now also becoming a shift toward people wanting to incorporate more whole plants in their diet. 95% of Americans don't get enough fiber. We're realizing that fiber keeps us alive. I mean, it's connected to our mental health, our physical health. So I think there's just a whole myriad of things that are making it make sense for people to switch to oat milk or a plant-based milk,
Yeah.
whether they can digest it or not.
Yeah, come for the plant-based, the ingredients, and then stay for the taste. Seems like
Exactly.
That.
yes.
Did you I just thought about this. So you with the special packaging that keeps it shelf stable, is it pasteurized at all? Does it go through any heating process?
It is pasteurized.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's important. I mean, we
Has
want
to
to
be.
make sure, yeah,
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
everybody is good. And we have very strict quality control. And with oats, it's interesting because when you think about how you eat oats, perhaps more traditionally, whether you're having steel cut oats, which are again the whole oat groat,
Yeah.
similar to what we use, you always cook them, almost always cook them, unless you're doing like overnight oats and then they're being soaked, or you're making them in granola or something. So it is it is not that far off from the more traditional ways to prepare oats.
Yep.
Are there any nutritional benefits lost in that pasteurization process that you all are aware of?
We aren't aware of any nutritional benefits being lost, and in some cases, when you really dig into the health benefits of oats, there's evidence to say that it's better to have them be cooked.
Hmm.
So if anything, there might be a benefit on the other side.
Yep,
Gotcha. Like
makes sense.
easier to digest or
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
right, yeah, that makes sense. Gotcha. I remember too, this is kind of switching topics, but I remember when we talked last time, you mentioned before Willa's, I believe you were involved with Panera Bread and taking out like a lot of preservatives and things like that. Can you
Yeah.
explain that a little bit? Because I remember that being very interesting.
Yeah, that was a real wake up call for me. So I used to work in advertising, and I was working on the agency side with Panera as a client when they cut out all the preservatives and artificials from their menu items. They I believe they were buying the most antibiotic free meat of anyone in the US. Like, they were making just these dramatic sweeping changes. Hundreds of ingredients were being taken out of their menu items. I don't know if they're still as clean as they were back in 2017, but this was a really big deal at the time. And so I was getting this whole education on all the weird stuff that goes into our food. And a lot of those ingredients on the no list of, these fast food and fast casual restaurants, I was seeing in the plant-based milks in the grocery aisle. So it was a real wake-up call for me that, like, we went from kind of having the seed of an idea with my grandmother's recipe to thinking there's a real need for this. Somebody needs to fill this gap with a product that lives up to the ideals of the category.
I guess coming from that ad agency background, that I'm sure that's extremely helpful with Willa's. One thing that has been a continuing theme throughout all the different topics that we've covered is kind of the almost misuse of maybe a lot of advertising words and how companies might use them to their advantage on their labeling, not just plant-based milks, but more generally. Is that something that you all are aware of and thoughtful of?
Yeah, I think the lack of transparency in the food industry is just, I find it really disheartening. And I think it makes it really, really hard for people to figure out how to eat healthy. Um, it's something we take really, really seriously. We don't make any claims that we can't fully back up. For example, we use organic oats, and we started having people reach out and saying, are these for sure glyphosate free though? Because there is starting to become some testing and research that suggests, oh, if the oat crop was next to a crop that was sprayed with glyphosate and it's a windy day, maybe it blows in and then you've got this glyphosate residue. And we thought, oh my gosh, that is an alarming thought. Thank you for raising this issue. And this is where I love having such a close relationship with our fans and our customers. And so we reached out to our oat suppliers and we said, we want to make sure that we understand, whether this residue is getting on there. You can't use glyphosate or synthetic pesticides to be organic, but we really wanted to go the extra mile. So we went and dug into the testing, and we got the glyphosate free certification on top of the organic certification. I think it's just really important to help provide clarity in a world where there is such a lack of clarity about our food system. And that's just something that's really important to us. And again, everything we do has to live up to my grandmother's name. She was real, she was honest. So we want to be, real and honest, and just do things the best possible, healthiest, and most sustainable way imaginable.
Yeah, a core value there, always going back to it. I love that. That transparency, I think, is really important. And we've talked about how people should look for that certification if they can on ingredients because it does provide that extra level of comfort. Like you said, you just don't know sometimes. So definitely look for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
I'm glad more brands are doing that, testing to ensure their products are glyphosate free. Because, like you said, it can easily, the glyphosate from one farm can blow over to the organic farm or something like that. I gave this example last week in the podcast episode, but I went to California to tour an almond orchard last year, and
Cool.
we were driving down this road. Yeah, it was a really cool experience. And on one side of the road was conventional, and it looked dead. It was basically just dirt. And then on the other side of the road, they were practicing regenerative agriculture, and everything was green, and they had animals on the land. And it was just like, this road was not wide. So I could easily see how, the glyphosate, which I asked them, I was like, are you spraying glyphosate on this field? And they were like, yeah. And I could easily see how that could easily just get contaminated on the other road. So it's definitely important that, brands are going the extra step and testing to ensure that even though they're oats or, any other product that's sprayed with glyphosate is truly glyphosate free.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was important to us.
Previously you talked about how, your oat milk is much higher in fiber and the importance of fiber. Um, can you go a little bit more in depth on why do we need fiber? Why is it so important?
Yeah, fiber is sort of like the unsung hero. I sort of think that, we've gone as kind of recently it's been this focus on protein for so
Mhm.
long. And I think a new wave is starting where there's more of a focus on fiber. You've got things like the blue zones coming out where people live to 100. They're eating more plant-based, but the net there is they're getting a lot more fiber as well. And they're now discovering how important fiber is for our microbiomes, which are connected to our brains, connected to every aspect of our body, our immune system. And, a lot of us, who grew up in America were beneficiaries of, taking antibiotics, which grateful to have those, but there's also a flip side to that, right? It can affect our microbiomes. So can glyphosate and pesticides that can mess with your microbiomes, just like it can kill the microorganisms, the good bacteria and things in the soil. It can mess with our own gut health. So if we're wanting to prioritize gut health, we're wanting to, live long, if we want to have, little brushes cleaning out our colons, which it gets a little weird and like, but it's good for you. Fiber is really the key to that. And 95% of Americans don't get enough fiber. So it's, and there's ways to get it that aren't, your grandparents' Metamucil. You can get it from whole
Yeah,
plant-based
right.
foods. I think a lot of times we think about fiber and it's like you have that image of like, you know, as somebody over a certain age, kind of pulling out the
Yeah.
Metamucil container or something like that. But the best source of it is from whole plant-based foods. And oats are an amazing example of this. It's, a type of fiber that most people can digest. Hardly anybody has an allergy to oats or an intolerance to oats. And so I think it's like kind of amazing to me that this ingredient that can help create a more living, more flourishing, more dynamic and diverse soil and a more nutrient dense soil and more nutrient dense foods can also do the same thing for our bodies.
Mm.
So yeah, I'm obviously biased, but I think, the data has come out around oats being a really great example of something that can help support your physical and mental health.
Yeah. And you mentioned prebiotic fiber too. And prebiotic basically just means it's feeding your good gut bacteria.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. You're feeding the good guys.
exactly. Yep. Awesome. Well,
Cool.
before we wrap up here with one last question, well, I guess two things. One, if people want to learn more about Willa's and where to buy or anything like that, where can we direct them?
Yeah, you can always head to willaskitchen.com, WILLASKITCHEN.com. Today we're offering, actually, sorry, in perpetuity, we're offering 30% off for your fans with the code Clean Kitchen
Love
on
it.
willaskitchen.com. If you're, into Amazon Prime, we're offering a 30% off code on Amazon on Willa's oat milk. You can use the code Clean Oats 30 on Amazon, and that's good until May 8th. And then, we're in Central Market, Erewhon, Bristol Farms in California, Nugget in California, lots of co-ops. So you can check out our store locator at willaskitchen.com as well.
Awesome. And we'll leave all that information in the description as well, so you guys can go and check that out. So if you had to choose one product of the three, you have the original, the chocolate, and then the barista, which one is your favorite? And I guess, what is your favorite way to use it?
That's such a hard question, Kyle. Okay, so I'll just talk about my usage. I put Willa's unsweetened original into my matcha every morning. I love Willa's chocolate as a hot chocolate or a mocha, or as like an afternoon treat, because it also has protein. And then Willa's barista. Yeah, heat it up is the best, to be
I've never done
honest.
that.
It's so good. You can just like put it in the microwave if you don't have time, or on the stovetop.
Yeah.
And then Willa's barista, when I go to a coffee shop and I can get a matcha latte with the barista oat milk with a little bit of latte art, that always just makes my morning.
Yeah, that's amazing. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening, everyone out there. Thank you for Christina for coming on. And we will see everybody in the next episode.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.